You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Hello, everyone. It isn't the end of the world, but it is the end of the week, which means it's time for the V.A.C. Roundtable. Credit that one to Michael Crowitz. Hello, everybody. Thank you and welcome. We are welcomed by, needless to say, another person who we wanted to share time, discussion, and respect with, and that is Lelehnia DuBois. And she is here to talk about sustainable cannabis, which of course is something we're all very much a fan of. But she's been working on various projects, specifically on terroir projects, among others. And we wanted to welcome to get an understanding about what is happening as people are looking to see what is out there, what is potential, where things going. And needless to say, we're very fortunate to share this time with Lelehnia. So thank you very much for joining us today. And I'm gonna go right into the first question, which is one we ask everybody, which is, what brought you to cannabis? And it's kind of a multi-part question. You're welcome to share what or you like or what not to. I know you grew up north, so you may have had a little exposure earlier or not. When did you first hear about cannabis? When did you first try it? Share with us.
All right. Well, first, I want to thank all of you for not only inviting me to share this space with you, but for all of the sacrifices that you have done for all of us as veterans for our country. I have great admiration and respect. I come from a military family, and thank you, thank you, thank you. And also thank you for being such a loud, strong, respected voice at the federal level. You guys lead us in advocacy in so many ways because it truly comes from the heart. And I have a lot of great respect for that and appreciation. So I want to start there. I mean, what you guys are doing here is incredible, and it helps all of us. So thank you. Wow, what brought me to cannabis? My mother's birth canal. No, I don't know. It's kind of what brought me to cannabis. My mom was an amazing woman, and she was a big change maker. She was a part of developing the first People's Food Cooperative in the United States. We lived in a very counterculture community. But one of the problems with those counterculture communities is a lot of dirt could get drug in under the rug. And in the community we were in Southern California, we were subjected to a lot of violence, a lot of not nice things. And my mother threw us in the back of her Volkswagen bus, me and my little sister, and we traveled for about 6 months and ended up in this beautiful little corner of the world called Trinity County, which is an arm of the Emerald Triangle, and had some very catastrophic events that really solidified us in the community. Losing my sister was one of them in an accident. And what it did is it really showed us what community was, not just commune, but community. And Trinity County, Humboldt County opened their arms for the three of us, and we developed our lives starting in 1978 in the Emerald Triangle. Back then in 78, cannabis was just becoming a thing to grow. in the Emerald Triangle. I mean, it'd been being grown for probably about 10 years, pretty under the covers. But we really started building community around it in the 70s. And my mother was a midwife. She was a nurse. And so we fit right into that alternative lifestyle, into the community that the Back to the Landers were creating. And we became Back to the Landers ourselves. As a Back to the Lander, we didn't go get regular jobs. We chose places to live that were incredibly rural and isolated, so we could live with the land, not take from the land, but kind of become a part of it. So utilizing our local resources and our climates were really how we supported ourselves, from firewood to cannabis. Logging is another big industry that we had up here. Fishing is another big industry. Mining, not all that long ago. But for most of the Back to the Landers, what resonated with our values was growing cannabis. And it really became the foundation of how we built some pretty amazing self-sustainable collaborative communities. I started trimming when I was 9. So like that's my first official, but I actually was pinching peas out of the baby sister's closet when I was in diapers. So I don't know.
A little bit of experience is what you're saying from the early ages to be expected. But it's always fascinating what has, because everybody has a different story, what brought them to cannabis and their involvement. Majority of people, it's later on in life. It sounds like literal baptism. Well, with that, we will carry on. And next up will be Council Member Alex Popoff. Council Member Popoff.
Hi, and thanks again for joining us. The question we have is, can you tell us about the Humboldt Grace Project?
Yes, I sure can. It's like my favorite thing to talk about, frankly. Well, I think we're all the place with legalization that we can see that it's really, policy has truly been created around economics. I was a leader in the policy conversation in 2014 and 15. I was the chair and president of an organization called California Cannabis Voice Humboldt. And we actually sat down with our legislators in California and our local board of supervisors to begin the conversation of recreational legalization. Really quickly, in fact, I helped write the speech that came to our board of supervisors and said, tax us, tax us. We started using economics as a pathway to recreational legalization. When being a patient, I've been in a wheelchair for 6 years. I have a spinal cord injury. I had to grow specific medicines for my needs. I also had to grow specific plants for the way I grew. I was an indoor vertical cultivator. So genetics were a really important part to my success with the plant. And as I saw us moving forward around how much how much for a pound, how many pounds can we grow? You see this garden behind me. This garden is like 1,000 square feet. It's not huge. It's not massive, right? Well, when we're talking about making money off the pounds, and we knew when the market saturated, that cost was going to go down, all of a sudden, our beautiful back to the land little farms, in order to play in the legal game, they had to go big or go home, which not only created, as I saw, an economic consequence for our community, because we didn't build cannabis around going big and going home. We built it around innovation and quality, but it also impacted the design of our community, which was to be givers, not takers from the environment. We I wasn't raised to grow commercial ag. I was raised to create a beautiful medicine that could take care of me in my home. And that is what built these communities. It's also, as we know now, what creates good food, what creates good art, what creates all sorts of things, right? Is like honing in on the creativity and the knowledge in the person. And so I really saw that as our core gift to give as this, and our duty by the plant to how we engage in this industry. And through that, a way to teach those core values, which to me are love and grace. You know, when you are navigating and you're building a community and your neighbor is sleeping with your wife, you have to navigate that gracefully or you all go to jail, right? Like, we didn't screw each other over. We had to support each other, even if we didn't like each other. And then for me, love is the foundation of how I walk. The more I heal myself, the more I know that I need to put myself in a place of love. And the more I hate, the more I stress, the more I hurt, and the less productive I am. And all of those theories were taught to me, not just by this plant, but by the trees that I used to go sit with and cry when I was sad. And nature gave us those values. And I truly believe that the reason this plant has gotten to where it is not because of economics. It's truly because, well, we have legalization because of the patient, but we had these communities that were able to curate this plant because their mission wasn't to make a bunch of money. Their mission was to create cultures that were more indigenous than what Western civilization has created within themselves. And I got a little going on my soapbox and lost track of the question, Alex.
I know I think you were right on track. We were just talking about the Humboldt Grace Project, and you said, you know, well, what brought you to that is important. And you're just kind of leading off with the first question, in my opinion. So.
Okay. So the Humboldt Grace Project, I had this amazing mentor who inspired me to go public with cannabis in 2009. And he came up with the name Humboldt Grace. He saw it as a big brand. You know, Cheryl Schumann was creating, what was it, Hollywood weed or something with a big Hollywood name at the time, right? And he thought I could do that. That's just not my style. But when I separated from the PAC, the organization doing policy, I'm a healer and I'm a spiritual teacher. And for me, I wanted to navigate, not with Lele, because I had built a name for myself, but I wanted to navigate in a way that showed that this wasn't about me, this was about us. And why he came up with Humboldt Grace is all the same reasons that he saw in me are all what the community gave to me. And I felt we weren't, I mean, you guys are vets. I feel very strongly that people that have been involved in the drug war, especially generationally, have a very similar experience to being a vet. I'm one of those people. I have extreme PTSD that has impacted my life in so many negative ways. And not having that conversation has led us to where we are now, which is crappy policy that doesn't support community, which means there's no economics, because if there's no people surviving, there's no money being made. And it was a platform to have that conversation and to start helping my community out. You know, we did a fire recovery project. We gave multiple $500 checks to locally based nonprofits that support these rural communities during crises. We've also given $500 ag and building supply vouchers to numerous cannabis farmers that were impacted by the fires. You know, we needed that happening, because that's what I thought we were all about. And then as we started moving forward, I discovered that we could do more. And I think we'll get to that in the legacy project conversation, or maybe I should talk about that now. You know, when you want to solve a problem, You can't just put a pretty dress on it. You just can't just put makeup on it. Like that doesn't work. That like melts off, right? You have to go to the heart of the problem. And myself and many others saw that the seed was the solution to these small communities. And that if when we look at the plant and we let the plant speak for us through science and through data, that we don't have to say anything. She sings for us when we allow her to show what we have, what she is doing. And so we wanted to discover pathways to protect, to authenticate and give more value to this plant, and to educate our local communities and the industry on how to look at this plant a little differently than we are right now, because we are losing medicine daily because of the way policies have been built. And so I made a bunch of phone calls. I have amazing people who support me, like Michael, throughout this industry. And I said, hey, will you guys all come meet with me once a week, every Friday, and let's figure this out. And so for the past almost 3 years, we now have, I think, 134 people that show up on and off. We have
Lelehnia, can you hold on a second, because it's a very important topic you're getting into, but we have a question around that we want to structure around the Legacy Genetics Project. So can I let Wade ask that? And it's one that's very important to me, because as you see here, I have a bud tattooed on my forearm. And this was a genetic called the Wave. And I got this back in the late 90s in Oakland. And I grew it and was able to keep it. And unfortunately, it was one of those genetics that fell to the wayside and was lost. So this is a pet project of something I've always appreciated, because I've provided and have provided medicine for the past 24 years at Berkeley Patients Group to people. And the big frustration is for them to come through and to see genetics that they know and love or what work for them, and then they can never get them again. So with that, I'm going to turn over this next question to keep the continuity going to Council Member Wade Laughter. Council Member Laughter.
Thank you, Etienne. And Lele, I got to say that response to our second question was really inspiring to me. You spoke a lot of language that I related to very clearly. And so much like Etienne and you have specific interest and need even. I think it's fair to describe, you have a need for certain specific versions of this plant we love so much. And preserving those specific versions can be quite challenging. And needless to say, as Etienne has said, many of them have fallen by the wayside. There's a few that are well known and much loved and much sought after. Not many of them are the ones that really help people who need cannabis, is my opinion. So I think this Legacy Genetics Project, how can this project help the small craft cannabis farmers create added value to their products and help create a sustainable industry and market? And that was one of the things you called out in your description of the Emerald Triangle culture. It was community-based. It was about taking care of the people in your community in a sustainable and responsible way. So this genetics question is really a big one for me and for many of us. Can you speak to that and what this might do to help those farmers? Thank you.
Well, that's a really big question, but it's also the entire reason, or it's the inspiration around this project. I mentioned earlier, how when we created legalization here in California, a lot of farmers were small. You didn't have to be big to participate in the medical market. And one of the organizations around here literally started a slogan saying, "Go big or go home." Well, nothing that I was taught from this taught you to go big. It taught you to be innovative and smart and creative. It taught you to use the resources around you. It taught you to respect and support your neighbor regardless of your opinion about them. And so we see that the genetics in these cultures, first of all, we have generations of outdoor genetics that are stable and strong and can be counted on. The legal market is saturated. We're like minutes away from being a monocrop in the legal market because we're only working off a very small foundation of not even legacy landrace outdoor genetics. The most of our genetics in the market are indoor, and I think a lot of us on here understand the instability of a cultivar that is created without the diversity of what outdoor can bring. Well, now we don't only understand this. All those big guys, they're at a 40% crop loss right now because of the instability of the genetics. Well, the cannabis legacy community, and when I speak to the cannabis legacy community, I want to make it clear, I am not speaking only to Humboldt. We have people from Morocco in our group. We have people from Croatia in our group. I speak to the people that have sacrificed their lives and their families for generations around this plant across the globe. We're called Humboldt Grace because that is where I am, and that is the community that brought me to this. And it also allows me to partner with local nonprofits that support us so we can do this good work. But the legacy community to us is global. And we see this project not as our project, but as a global community project that everyone should be participating in no matter where they are. So one, it helps starting teaching all of that I just said. We need to teach the big guys that the reason they're at a 40% crop loss is because they don't have those stable outdoor genetics. What does that do? That automatically increases the value of the outdoor farmer. Right there, they've all of a sudden gone up in value. It also starts telling our state, which California has really poor policy around genetics, that we need to get these foundations into the marketplace so we have real medicine. And for the guys who just care about money, so we have real production that we count on. And so we have consumer loyalty to those brands, because right now, people are not going back and buying that pre-roll over and over again. They're going and picking the best label. And if you, like we all know, if you're a patient or you have a real need, that doesn't help you. But even if you're just having fun and as a consumer and you enjoyed that experience, you want to know you're going to get that experience again. And the best way to do that with this plant is securing your genetic foundation, your process around that foundation so that you produce the product over and over again. Two things our communities literally have. Some of the communities I'm talking about have thousands of years of experience around this. This is our IP. And as we gain data around that IP and cultivate the data with the genetics, now all of a sudden that's of value, and we've just shown how smart we are. So I believe that by focusing on the genetics, teaching this pathway helps, one, keep our small farmers small, inspires them to innovate, to do research, which is all in alignment with the original foundations of our culture. We're all of a sudden not capitalists. We're the researchers, we're the Einsteins. And now the industry is looking to us for leadership once they understand that. So the Legacy Project was a way to bring all these amazing people together, create an incubator around it, and figure out a pathway to do those three things. And we were donated by a gentleman named Marty Yip. He's a well-respected breeder in this community. He purchased the Skunk One seeds for himself, like with no intention of this. And then I came to him with this project and I'm like, man, no one's listening to me. I need somebody to donate me something because we got to get this rodeo going. We've already experienced successful licensing agreements that will pay for someone's college tuition in the future, right? This is way smarter to me than selling your weed for $500 a pound, and it's more sustainable. So how did we get that across? We called everybody in, we found the pathway, we were donated this skunk one. And, you know, honestly, because I come from the hills, I didn't even know what the Emerald Cup was until 2014. Okay. I really am like not in the market, that part of this experience. But like, how do we inspire and move forward in that? And it really was like, we had to teach everybody how to value the plant again, to remind everybody of their value again. And being donated these 2 skunk collections, we didn't know what they were going to show us. I mean, we didn't really care. We didn't even care that they were skunks. What we needed was something that we could legally play with to put through this process. Well, the plant, like I said earlier, when you let her sing, she's an opera star. And these 2 cultivars have given us so much gifts just in the first step, which was really comprehensive DNA testing. And through that DNA testing, we were able to scientifically prove that this is part of the lineage from David Watson's because of testing that was done in 2014. It's not an argument. And we're not saying it is David Watson's, but it is. We have proof that it is of that lineage. And then the other one, she's like, you know, she's the queen. She gave us these heterozygote alleles, 6 of them in alignment that are also found in David Watson's, but not her heterozygous, which has never been documented yet. Are we going to find more plants like that? I hope so, because we just got started, right? But we didn't find this before. And we don't know what all that means or does, because we're just starting on research with cannabis. You know, we just started all this, right? Not that long ago. But what we know is it's unique. And what we know is it will teach the community that you might have something really unique and special that suddenly isn't worth $300 a pound. If you look at cookies, and this is the best example, they made $89 million off of gelato. Let's think about that. $89 million off of one plant. That's what everybody should be doing. That's the kind of business these communities are capable of, is they have the gelatos that can allow a company to build like that, or they can build like that. That's up to them. I'm not going to I don't want to tell people how to do business. But it creates the education so people have hope. People make better decisions when they're not in crisis, as we all know here. So the legacy, that's what the Legacy Project is a way to educate that information, a way to research that information, a way for some really big plant geeks to come together and sesh out when they want to. And actually next week, we're launching a show around it on the US Weed Channel. That is an 8-series show that really walks you through how to do this with different experts. So that's it in a nut.
Well, it's something, I mean, I've talked about for years. We talked about on Hash Church, which I did with Dave on Hash Church. And I was fortunate enough to spend some time with him a few months ago when I was in Amsterdam. And we were talking about how there's such a need, especially in Northern California, for a germplasm institute, one that is just keeping these genetics, actually doing what you're stating, but on top of that, and most importantly, acclimating them, growing them in experimental patches all over the state and acclimating them for 2 years so that it becomes stable. Because as you know, the biggest problem with a lot of these genetics, they were grown somewhere around the world, and we're trying to grow them in an expectation that we've been told that this is now an 8-week varietal, but for some reason it's now at 10 weeks, you know, and people don't understand that aspect of genetics. I understood that originally because I worked for Steve D'Angelo and Ecolution, and which was a hemp company, and so we were buying our hemp seeds for our hemp genes, etc., that we were making. We were buying them from the Humboldt Institute and the Vavilov Institute, which were strictly germplasm institutes, keeping these hemp genetics going consistent. So when I needed this much hectares of finished cloth, I was going to get exactly that, because of course we're growing for two different commodities from the plant. But it gave the understanding for me early on is that was I saw, especially with hemp, is a lot of people are taking these northern genetic acclimatized seeds and trying to grow them in Texas and absolutely falling on their faces because these genetics aren't acclimated, much less are climatized to that type of condition. And some genetics are, because back in the day, remember, we used to do clone exchanges. I used to work for Ed Rosenthal, and I went on one where we would literally blindfolded put into a van, carrying my clones in a container, and then taken to a house, and then taken in, blindfolds taken off, and then it turned into a clone orgy where everybody's exchanging clones, so that we knew what we had, what was the expectation, and then we were all then blindfolded again, put it into vans, and then driven off into the night. So we never knew where we were. We just knew we all met, and there were clone exchanges. But from those clone exchanges, we had genetics that grew too dense. And we had them literally core mold all up the middle because there was just no transpiration of oxygen and air. So it's taught me early that not only do we need to save these genetics, but we have to acclimate them. Otherwise, people are going to get a frustration. The first pot I grew back in 89, I literally, it was a seed I took out of of course, it was a way southern of Southern California varietal. And I tried to grow it in a closet, and it grew through my closet, right? Because it was equatorial and thinking it was the sun. And I thought I had a genetic that was going to look really good, like it was in high times. And of course, genetics, acclimatization, understandings are things I had no understanding, and working in this industry over the years has given me an understanding. But a lot of the growers and producers still don't understand that reality unless they have grown that genetic and seeded it, and most of them only perpetuated as clones. So how do you maintain these genetics? I mean, are you using tissue culture, or you're just storing seeds? I mean, there's a lot of biodiverse ways to save genetics, but there has to be, and we have to merge you with a germplasm institute, because the knowledge that you're doing is all in line with that. So maybe you just change it into a germplasm institute and get the funding and make it a reality.
Well, the dream goal is to have a research institute that has that, right? And I love what you brought up about needing to stabilize the plant. A lot of people go, oh, the Emerald Triangle, oh, poo-poo, you guys have these big egos, which I don't disagree. We've got some really big egos that come out of here. But the reason the Emerald Triangle is so important in the future of this plant is because within a very small radius, we have many diverse microclimates. The region is very unusual because of the mountain ranges, the rivers, the air. There's like so much to that part of the conversation. And so we do have the capability to take, like we have this skunk one, we put it out through the grow off to 40 farms in the regions in different places. And we're going to get all this diverse information back from those 40 farmers that are in different microclimates, and see what does this produce. We're not doing this with all the data that all the scientists want. We're not doing this perfectly, but we're also doing this on no budget. This is all volunteers, yet we've gotten this far. So we're really excited to see the kind of information we get back from the grow off, because we're going to see, does Willow Creek produce more of the citrus that David created in Skunk One? And that's something I want to say about Skunk One, is everybody's like, oh, the skunky Skunk One. Well, David did not create this to be skunky. He actually did quite the opposite. He worked with this to eliminate the skunk smell, to bring in the grow traits, because it was such a great plant, and make it more commercially viable. So maybe we're going to find a region that does produce the thiols. We don't know. We honestly don't know. We don't care. We just want the information so we can learn. But that's part of why I have so much passion around focusing on research in these regions, because we don't have to do it all in a lab. We already have the infrastructure, the climates, and the genetics to do amazing work to help stabilize the industry around this. And I really feel so strongly, if you know an germplasm institute that I can talk to, send them my way. I got 4 permits to build it on. But our goal, I like baby steps so we can accomplish them with the Legacy Project, is if we do raise a lot of funds, what we want those funds to go to is to start to create community. And what that means is that they're accessible to patients as well as licensed cultivators. We'd have to have them in 2 different facilities. That is a cryobank holding those tissue cultures. So we can start that process. And what we're going to do is, we already have some amazing nursery partners like Hendricks Farms who have agreed under the Humboldt Grace SOP to house those cryobanks so we can begin that process, because you are absolutely right. We are losing medicine by the minute, especially as these farms exit metric, as they walk away. They're literally having to throw mamas away that break my heart.
No, it's key, and I don't know of an actual germplasm institute. That's something that we need to find people, but write plans so that they can leave their will money kind of thing, because it's a large undertaking. As you said, it's all volunteers, and this is very expensive undertaking when you start thinking about, TCing all these genetics to tissue culture people. Sorry for all you plant nerds out there. To tissue culture, I mean, that's very expensive technology to keep, unless you're keeping them and breeding those seeds and seed stock, if it is, as you state, what it is originally, what it is, because gene mapping is, of course, is telling us a lot, and needless to say, that is way over the price, expensive, but that's what is needed in a germplasm institute, is to have those types of fellows who can come in and work on that type of doctoral dissertation and take that knowledge and, expand it, because there's so many thousands of genetics out there, right? And I've dealt with so many patients that have found this specific chemovar type. And so we need to also isolate specific chemovar types, because all the funny names don't necessarily sync over to everyone, and they're called different things in different states. However, if we have certain terpene profiles and understanding of these chemovar types, that's going to be another breakthrough for the patient as well as for the individual, because they're going to find what they're looking for, as opposed to always going expecting Coca-Cola and only having Pepsi as their choice, or, Mountain Dew out because that's all we have, right? And that's the reality that everybody from patient to provider struggles with and has struggled with. So it's definitely a long arcing plan to arrive at the justice we seek, but you're starting at a great point, which is a point which needed to be started. So I can't thank you enough from everyone around cannabis, because we need this, and what you're doing is so key to what we need. So I can't thank you enough for your passion, because it's going to drive others to, lift their torches to light it off of your light in the future.
Oh, well, thank you. It really is a group effort. Everybody's torch has come together on this. Like, really, everyone has brought their value to the table and shared, which is how we built houses back in the day. So that's really what I am most proud of around this project, is how we're accomplishing all these goals together.
Absolutely. Councilmember Crowitz, I do believe you're up with our next question.
Wow, this is a great conversation. I really can't thank you enough for sharing some time with us. I already had a kind of a little bit of an intro that I wanted to put to this question, but you're really have inspired me to go a little bit deeper. And with everyone's indulgence, I have something I'm going to actually read everyone. I'll take your indulgence in two ways. One is reading something, and the other is hopefully that I don't piss off David, because it was back channel communication with regard to my impassioned plea that I made on the video that we did with the Humboldt Grace Project not that long ago, where I was talking about giving back and the great legacy cannabis, Panama Red and stuff like that. Anyway, it's funny talking to young folks today, and even in the last 10, 15, 20 years, and explaining to them that it's actually harder today to be a cannabis connoisseur than it was back then in the 70s. It's hard for them to get their brain around. I mean, on its face, it would seem silly, because the bulk of the cannabis back then was rather low grade, and the bulk of the cannabis today is rather high grade. However, the limits were changed, and the cannabis that was available then was very distinct. What we call geographically specific indications, the differences varied wildly from region to region, and the quality was off the charts, beyond what Robert Connell Clark called the genetic ceiling of indoor cultivation. You had some really special bud that you could choose from and try and enjoy. But anyway, I've always been a connoisseur, cannabis connoisseur, a small breed, and really take pride in that. And I come from that perspective. I think that's why, in a way, I gravitated to the things that I do. I am on the board of the Origins Council. We're working on the first applications for the first cannabis appellations in the world in California. Right now, grafted to us from the Adult Use Act that was passed years ago. Now already years ago. Yeah, let me read this to you. This was in response to, again, my passion plea to give back. David says, I see in the video that you want to repay the grower folks that we got Acapulco Gold and Panama Red from in the 60s, but that is impossible, he says. And in fact, they were just temporary custodians. The varieties were developed by thousands of growers over hundreds of years in local landrace areas of the world. How can they all ever be repaid? They cannot. I'm not sure if you know about the United Nations Biodiversity Act, first signed by 150 nations back in 1992. An important part of the biodiversity debate involves access to and sharing of the benefits arising out of the commercial and other utilization of genetic material, such as pharmaceutical products, etc. Most of the world's biodiversity is found in developing countries, which consider it a resource for fueling their economic and social development. Historically, plant genetic resources were collected by commercial use outside their region of origin, or as inputs in plant breeding. Foreign bioprospectors have searched for natural substances to develop new commercial products. Such drugs often, the products would be sold protected by patents or other intellectual property rights without fair benefits to the source countries. And the treaty recognizes national sovereignty over genetic resources and provides access to valuable biological resources be carried out in a, quote, mutually agreed terms and subject to, again, quote, prior informed consent of the country of origin. When a microorganism, plant, or animal is used for commercial application, the country from which it came from has the right to benefit. Such benefits can include cash, samples of what is collected, the participation and training of national researchers, the transfer of biotechnology equipment and know-how, and shares of any profits from the use of the resources. Work has begun to translate this concept into reality, and there are already examples of benefit sharing arrangements. At least a dozen countries have already established controls over access to their genetic resources, and an equal number of nations are developing such controls. And I will add that he did this and said all this without knowing that we've had a small team in Geneva looking into this already for 5 years. And he was actually also complimenting us on our fantastic work in Vienna, where we changed the treaty, and said that he had aspired to such things, but it really didn't quite imagine us getting it done. So thank you, David. I hope I didn't piss you off by reading this, but it's so damn important for everybody to have this on the record. That was a huge amount of information. Feel free to rewind and play it like 8 times. It is really important. So anyway, back to the question, right?
Can
So the question actually, all right, go ahead.
Can I add something? I just want to, we keep bringing up David, and I want to give thanks to David, because really what we're trying to teach with the Legacy Project is what David has already accomplished. And he has been incredibly patient and kind with us through this process. I don't know all the industry stuff. I grew up in a beautiful little community and was isolated from all that. But he really has been kind. He has taken lots of hours with me and some other folks around this to ensure that we're not over speaking, that we're telling the truth, and that we are doing this in a way that is real. And I just want to give a good shout out to him, because if anybody really wants to learn what the Legacy Project's about, go look at what David Watson's already accomplished and do what he did. That's pretty much what it is.
Yes, we need more Dave Watsons out there. Absolutely. You hear that, Sam the Skunk Man? We need more Dave Watsons out there. He's actually agreed to do a roundtable with us, which we will pre-record. But absolutely, he is a big hero of ours, needless to say. And yeah. So, Michael, you were going to ask a question initially. I think we should get to that eventually.
Yeah, so the question revolves around a little discussion that we had, I think, on the margins, where we were talking about how there's a lot of products that are really, really great, that really have like a super appeal to the consumer, especially medical cannabis consumer, but they don't seem to be able to have the ability to get the shelf space because of the fact that, sort of as a holdover of prohibition, THC is the predominant, sort of indicator that's being used to market cannabis. So the question was, how has that prevented the market from discovering, this THC reliance, discovering many of the great Northern California products that exist?
Well, let's talk about, first of all, how we got to high THC. The only reason we got to high THC is because we started getting raided by camp and we had to go indoors. And then what happened is the plant compensated in THC for all these other amazing things that are really important to healing and experience. And I'll give you, let's see if we can see this. This smells like candy. And I have a lot of pain, but I also like to be very high functioning. It works so good on my pain and my anxiety. It like doesn't, and a lot of times they can knock you out. This, and there's one other one that I like to smoke right now. This is 15% THC. But it was grown outdoors and it has terpenes that don't express indoors. And it has some terpenes that are considered extinct. So we can't create that indoors. We can create this outdoors with this low THC plant. So what I like to tell the farmers in the community, and it's the same thing with the genetics conversation and licensing, is look, the average consumer is a teenager drinking wine coolers. Everybody had a wine cooler at some point, probably when they first tasted alcohol, because it tasted like Kool-Aid, but then you get sick. Then it doesn't, you progress into, whatever. So you take better care of yourself. We're dealing with a market overall that is not sophisticated enough to go, dude, I picked up that ice cream cake. Yeah, it got me really high, but didn't taste so good. I don't want to smoke 5 joints of it. You know, I want to like really enjoy. I want to like bite into that. You know, when we get to that place, then I think the THC, I think the consumer is going to change the THC conversation. What's happening is we have all these people running the industry that want to make a bunch of money, and we're a part of creating the THC conversation, promoting it like crazy. You know, we need some really good educational product campaigns to show why awesomine is better than THC. Did I get all of it? Let's see.
Actually, I have just since I don't see any other hands up, I have a add-on question that just jumped to my head. What would you say, you know, this is something that's really just cropped up very recently as an issue around the country, and that's people trying to put in place what's called THC caps. And that seems really, even though THC isn't the best indicator of good cannabis, capping it seems to be a good way to hurt it. What do you say to that generally? Just any thoughts off the top of your head about these people who are trying to force a THC limit or a THC cap on products that would be in the marketplace?
What I have seen through good policy, good government, and good community building is you don't cap things, you educate so people make healthy choices. I personally have people that really need those high THCs, not for getting high, but for other medicinal reasons. It does some really unique things with cancer and other things like that. So when you're talking about a cap, you might be stopping your grandmother from using cannabis to heal their cancer, or your mom or your husband or your child. So I have great concern for anything that caps the plant. I think what we need to do is look at policy from a completely different perspective, and that's from a human rights perspective. And then we're going to come out with a lot smarter policy than where we're at right now.
All right. I want to welcome back. We have our next question will be Council Member Sam Sussman, who is fresh out of the hospital after surviving. So I just want to say welcome back to the world. I'm sorry you had such a near-death experience, but glad you're back with us. And you've got our next question. Council Member Sussman.
Thank you so much for that, Etienne. Yeah, it's pretty nice to be alive after fighting Lemire syndrome and going into acute renal failure. So being back and healthy is got me more motivated more than ever. The question that I have is, can you explain the Canopy Right project and how the blockchain technology is being used to protect the cultivators from the cannabis industry?
Well, you look great, Sam, for just fighting for your life. I see a glow on you, so you must have a strong heart and spirit, I would imagine. Well, Canopy Right is, you know, when we were going through the Legacy Project, you know, I like to do things in steps so you're not going crazy. And the first thing we needed to do to even get the breeders to begin to engage was to protect them. You know, we had a big industry faux pas a few years ago that really put the hold on the genetics conversation and put a lot of people that I had been working for years around it, like 25 years, I've had some conversations with growers around this, getting them out there. Done, conversation over. So in order for me to start having a conversation about these pathways and doing business a little differently, I needed to be able to protect them, really protect them. And like we spoke of earlier, I believe it's not just the genetics, but I think our experience and our IP is also incredibly valuable. I've had a lot of different companies come to me and want to engage with my community around this conversation, want me to help them give access to my community. But what they were all gaining was that data. We have a lot of companies. In fact, I believe many of the companies that are thriving or surviving would probably be a better word right now, are doing that through sharing, selling their data. Because as we move forward, policymakers, researchers, medicine makers, they need that data. Marketers, everyone needs that data to make better choices as they move forward. And so Canopy Right did something unusual. first, they engaged and participated as a group with us in the Legacy Project. When I went to the Ethica Data Alliance and I said, hey, this is what I need. Jeff Hamilton, who's the founder of Canopy Right, came to me and said, I think I might have built what you need, but I don't know how to make it work right, because he didn't have the breeders to help make it work right. He's a really amazing attorney in the business, and what he did have was clients who had genetics that he knew were valued. So he went to a company called TMXQ and said, hey, can you create some unique system that really protects these guys? And they went to Hedera and they created this unique #blockchain system that we've been patenting. And what we did is we kind of turned the whole blockchain around into a way that we could create a system that the breeders could timestamp and put a prior art on their genetics, and also store their data, where they didn't have to put it in a lab first. They didn't need me to touch it first. It was all kept in their own home and on a blockchain that not even, I'm now one of the owners in Canopy Right, that we not even can access. I cannot access your data if you have it on private. He also agreed to develop it so home growers could participate. That was really important to me, because I believe the true jewels around the genetics are not yet into the market. And then he also created it so it can run on its own as this like protection mechanism for free. And he made it completely accessible to our community. We haven't initiated it yet, but we are going to be initiating smart contracts into that, so people could also begin these licensing agreements without the thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of costs that it takes to get an attorney to negotiate the contract. So he was willing, with his heart, this is his like heart-based project, not his job, to create it. So I felt secure enough that we were going to be protected, that the breeders would not get access to the data if we sold the company, the company wouldn't. The breeders would have the choice to share all that. And so it's this really unique blockchain hashtag technology that basically takes what blockchain is, which is a way to secure things, to timestamp things, and share them. Usually you use them in open source, and we flipped it around so it was incredibly closed source, and the breeders had a choice of how they wanted to participate in the market. If they want to make that open source, they can. If they don't have to. And we just wanted them to have a safe place to have a choice. And that's really what Canopy Right is a choice. And it's pretty simple. All you do is you grab some mature big water leaves, you get an evidence bag and a freezer bag, throw it in there. We have a little system so that evidence bag attaches to the blockchain, and then you put the leaves in your freezer. And those leaves can later down the road, if your DNA shows up to cure cancer and that's your plant, you can then go take that plant and cross-test it with your leaves in the freezer and go, oh no, Johnson & Johnson or whoever. You can't do that. You can't patent that. That's the biggest thing I think Canopy Right does, is it helps stop the rest of the world from patenting our legacies.
Councilmember Peggy Jones has a question.
Yes, I was wondering, since you're doing the growing in the soil and everything, why grow in the soil as compared to hydroponics? If hydroponics uses 80% less water, and you can control your growth and everything. My concern is if we start doing homesteading and growing outdoors, that eventually it's going to turn into what we have with our agriculture basis now, and our cannabis is going to become industrialized and go downhill. So why do you suggest we grow in the soil instead of doing hydroponics and stuff, since we're all everywhere short on natural resource of water? Thank you.
Well, I don't suggest, however, I prefer. I think eventually when we start looking at the plants through these scientific lenses, we're going to see that all these different processes create different outcomes. So different medicines, right? Like there's different values to that. I come from an area that has been growing cannabis for 6 generations documented. And we are small. This is an example of one of our gardens. We're very small, regenerative farmers, but not just with our medicine, with our food, with everything we do. This is how we live our lives. Why? Because we believe when you do that small local practice, you build a more sustainable infrastructure for community. You become a part of the ecosystem instead of extractive to the ecosystem. I want to talk about the water aspect of that a little bit. Cannabis does not take as much water as everybody seems to think. We actually have farms up here that use no water. It's called dry farming. But, you know, I know people that go, oh yeah, I water my plant every 2 days. I do not water my plant every 2 days. I water my plant when it needs it, which usually can be once a week. It's about going with what Earth is telling you to do, which is not extractive and is not as destructive. But every ecosystem, every community has different resources, right? They have different needs. We have different environments. And so I was an indoor vertical grower, you know, I loved it. I did use dirt. The reason I use dirt on indoor is because of the flavor, sister. You cannot compete, man. I've grown all waves, and you cannot compete on what flavor does to what the soil does to the flavor of this plant.
Thank you so much. I've always wanted to know, and so thank you.
All right, Council Member Mary Lynn Mathry, you will have our next question.
Oh, we can't hear you, Mary Lynn.
Helps to unmute, doesn't it?
Yes.
Well, glad to be here. Glad to meet you, Lelehnia. And did I hear you? Do you go by Lele?
Yeah, Lele is the general. My name is Lelehnia, and I appreciate you guys using it. But Lele became my name because it was a 10-minute conversation in my leadership instead of just getting to the point. So my board said, can we shorten your name so it's not such a conversation?
Yeah, I get it. I go by ML just because everybody shortens Mary Lynn to Mary, and I don't know who Mary is. So anyway, my question is, how has the adult rec market left patients and their caregivers behind?
Completely.
I mean, from a nursing perspective too.
Yeah, it's completely left caregivers and patients behind. They weren't even taken in consideration, I think, when we started creating policy around this conversation, when there was a really well-established system in place that was providing and giving access. This is one of the reasons that I'm so frustrated about the human rights conversation not being a bigger part of this conversation. I don't know, I can't speak to the other areas, but in California, we shut down 80% of the dispensaries that were in business. That removed access from patients. We had documented over 10,000 cannabis farmers utilizing the medical system to give the patients access. Now we have, I think it's like 127 or something still sticking in there in Humboldt County. To me, that is violating constitutional and human rights of all patients and care providers. I think if we start drilling the human rights, if we start showing the numbers. I was the chair of the Human Rights Commission in Humboldt County, and I did a survey. The powers that be didn't like it, so it got kind of sacked. But it showed that our suicide rate had increased by 86% in 1 year. that our child couch surfing rate, we were the highest in the nation. Those are the things that when we go speak to the politicians and we're lobbying for something, we need to throw those numbers at them, because now all of a sudden the grandma cares about what we're talking about. Now we're talking about things that impact all of us as a nation, not just as the weed crew, right? And so patients and caregivers who got us here, they've been completely lost in the dust. As a patient, I cannot purchase my medicine and get medicated, and I don't mean high. I do not mean high at all. I mean, my inflammation won't decrease, my nausea won't go away, my joints won't move better. 90% of the time when I go into a dispensary and purchase medicine, for a multitude of reasons, storage, the way it's there's all sorts of pieces to that impact you as a patient. I also can't find or even understand, because of the labeling, that, like we just talked about, THC and cannabinoids, and CBD, and I need more information to really understand that this is going to work for me. And then the names, you know, they don't tell me how this is going to work for me. So I could go on how the patients and the caregivers have been left behind, but I feel like what's more I really want to make is that they are the ones that laid the foundation for this. So how can we move forward without them? You know, the solutions, I don't know that, I mean, the solutions are more education. I mean, just more education. And what really sucks is that we as patients are exhausted, sick, and tired. It's why we love this plant so much. And legalization has really I mean, I think we've all seen how many people have passed away since legalization, large and small, in this conversation. And I truly believe it's not just the lack of access, but it's the exhaustion for fighting for your access to medicine and having to navigate it in a way that is absolutely exhausting.
Councilmember Sussman, you had a follow-up?
Yes, I live in a state where right now we're pushing for adult use, but currently we're medical only. And one of the things that I kind of see as an issue in a medical only state is our bud tenders here are paid $13.50 an hour. But when I have questions about my medication, like for instance, I just had acute renal failure.
Right.
If I didn't have a great medical marijuana doctor, I wouldn't have known that CBD with acute renal failure could be lethal. And that was one of the things that, because of the communication I have with my doctor, I was able to weed out a lot of the cultivars when I was able to start consuming my medicine again. That when I went into the dispensary and told them what happened and I was looking for medication, they recommended high CBD strains. And a lot of the education gap with the pay for our bud tenders doesn't match the education level needed for an example, what's at a pharmacy. And they're not treated as close to pharmacy techs, and they don't have a pharmacist who's there that can actually work with the interactions between the cultivars that we are consuming and the medications we're on. So when we talk about a medical market, I, here in Ohio, have tons of questions, because it seems like, while yes, we call it a medical market, there are parts of it that are treated that way, but other parts that are treated as profit centers. And I don't really know how we're able to combat that and how we're able to actually start having the conversation about the education on the bud tenders for the medicinal market. And I'm not sure if you have any ideas of how to actually combat that.
Well, immediately you have an amazing testimony that says exactly why we cannot get rid of medical. And let me tell you, recreational does not open the market up. You know, it did quite the opposite here. And I would fight really hard to ensure that that medical conversation stays in that recreational conversation, the good or the bad of it, because what that'll do is allow more doctors and nurses and pharmacists with legalization as it moves forward to get better educated and to want to get better educated because they're included in that conversation, right? Same with patients. But that's the solution in your state that I could see happening, is using that human rights issue, using your personal testimony as a way to say, hey, like, these are two separate animals in a sense. We all know as the plant it isn't, but when we're talking about usage, it definitely is. And a recreational store is more like going in and, you know, to the liquor store. And then let's have a medical market where we go in and we actually have educated people, there's standards, and we have different, like if someone was to put a cap on the THC, then medically maybe there is no cap. You know, things like that. Like, that's a much smarter policy, and it's going to last longer when we create policy that creates healthy access like that. But I would love, Samuel, to talk to you more and help any way I can around that conversation. And I can probably connect you to some other great advocates, which you might already be connected to in the area. But we blew it, man. We sold medical out for rec. And we were told that, oh, you know, everybody will get it. And that's just not what's happening.
So
I have a follow. I was going to follow up to you, Sam, in the aspect of you need to really demand it at the state level. You're going to have to educate people, create your own patients' rights organization around this specific issue, have them create a committee, and then you run for that committee to get your ass on that committee because you're well knowledge and versed on it. And if you aren't, then find somebody who is. But this is how we did SB 34 and others to continue to give away free cannabis here in California. You have to rally and get people to rally around a specific issue, and your issue is there and it's very valid. As a dispensary owner myself, one of the main things I do is I train my bud tenders a week before they even hit the floor. I train them on cannabis, the different types of cannabis, etc. But I've been doing this for 24 years. There's not many people who have the knowledge base that Berkeley Patients Group has or has been able to impart, but we do implore, since Ohio is still young in its medical cannabis phase, is it needs better oversight. And if they're not going to have that oversight, then you Ohioans need to create an oversight committee so that you can then tell them about the problems so that they will actually listen to you by calling you into chambers or calling you into, you know, the actual committees themselves to testify about what you're experiencing. But it's very possible, and we'll work with you further along that. But this is a prime opportunity, because if you're having this problem and seeing this problem, others are as well, and will rally around you and make it patient specific. That was the mistake we made here in California that we're still trying to rein back and have somewhat. But you know, we have a huge problem where we have a Department of Cannabis Control that doesn't understand that the amount of oxygen trapped in this cannabis is destroying the cannabis itself, where if they used an 80-20 argon nitrogen, well, nitrogen then argon, in the 80-20 mix, then you stabilize those crystals so you don't have the degradation, so people would get proper representations of cannabis off the vine, which the consumers aren't getting. And I say this as a, you know, as an actual dispensary for many years. I preferred what happened to pre-215 when I had control over what I had access to via testing, but also the unique genetics that we had, as stated. Sam, just to give you an understanding, 80% of the medical providers prior to 64 could not afford to make the leap to legalization in 2018. And that has steadily gone down since. And I think Lelehnia can agree with me in that reality, that grim reality here in California. So use this as a caution, right? Yes, we were early on and we thought we did it right, but we fucked up. So learn from our mistakes, and we'll be more than happy to point you out our errors. But that's a good way, or I've pointed you in a direction that may give you a better voice to lead that change there in Ohio, because you're quite a leader and a good person. Councilmember Mathry.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Samuel, I was thinking the same thing in terms of your story is, I mean, I think anybody can recognize that's a clear-cut problem there. And Lele, thank you for talking about that. I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia, and so we went medical and we went legal, and I think shocked the South, shocked us. But yeah, it's frustrating. They're literally selling a chocolate candy bar, 500 milligrams, 50 milligrams a square. And I'm just like, what are you doing? But yeah, you just feel when you're trying to tell patients something here, and then for them to go try to find a product, it can be just impossible. They've got to go to another state in many cases.
To be honest, I don't know a lot of real patients that are being truly medicated for cancer, for terminal illnesses through dispensary right now. There are like, what you guys have done at the Berkeley Patient Center is amazing. I've followed that for a long time, and I have mad respect. But unfortunately, that's not the norm. And it's really expensive. And we don't even produce those really needed true medicines in half the legal market. So yeah, it is. I implore all of you in your states and where you are to really support your patients and your colleagues in that conversation, for all of us.
Councilmember Laughter, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, and actually Lele touched on it. We've spoken about some of the challenges that patients here in California face with the new commercialization of cannabis that's happened under Prop 64 and the regulations that came from it. But one of the things that stuns me is what the actual retail price is that you have to pay for a product by the time you pay the excise tax and everything else, and everybody gets their opportunity to make a little bit of money on the supply chain. Yeah, the cost is just prohibitive. And to your point, yeah, most of the folks I know, including me, I'm fortunate enough our local dispensary has a very generous donation program for anyone that has a medical recommendation from their physician. And I take advantage of it. But the bulk of the cannabis that I use in treating my situation is provided to me by friends, people I know who do high quality work in this work, but don't have a license to do so, and are caregivers, if you will. And not just for me, but we have a pretty vigorous community here in Nevada County of cannabis as medicine, and have for a long time. Yeah, I'm really grateful for what you're doing, Lele. But yeah, cost is a real factor, and make that part of your work in representing for patients, because again, the cannabis as a medicine, but here in California, it's taxed unless you can get it through a donation program. And then you can get it for free. But yeah, if you're just buying it off the shelf, it's taxed, even if you're getting it as medicine. That's all I had. Thank you.
Councilmember Sussman.
So the cost of the product was just brought up. And one of the things that I just kind of went through was Ohio puts out their by the numbers. And one of the things that I kind of was looking at was the percentage of 100% disabled veterans income versus the cost per gram on average of cannabis. And here in Ohio, that's 14.2% of their disability income. Now, when we look at that, the numbers got a little bit staggering, and they're a little bit scary when I started doing the numbers. And a lot of it kind of shocked me when I started just playing with the numbers. And a lot of it is average cost. Now, here in Ohio, if you want whole flower, you're not paying the average cost. The average cost also includes what is shake, which is normally just sugar leaves with a few small buds tossed into it. So here in Ohio, we have the average cost per gram being $6.07. On a 90-day supply, that's around $1,500. Annually, that's $6,167. When you look at the income for a veteran on 100% disability, it ends up being $43,452. So when you actually get the percentage out, 14.19%. Then if you actually look at how much money our program has extracted from veterans, even though they do offer discounts, with 22,342 registered patients, the medical marijuana industry here in Ohio, which I will call a profit-seeking industry on the most part, has extracted over $137 million from veterans. And then that doesn't include the $100 medical card, which is usually what the discount is for veterans, which then bumps up the total cost of just getting your medical marijuana recommendation being $2.2 million. Then if we look at the state's processing fees in order to maintain metric, it well exceeds the cost of metric per year for the state of Ohio at $558,000 per year. And one of the things that still astounds me is that I was told I would be taken care of medically when I returned back. The Department of Veteran Affairs covers $0 of that. And it's a huge gap in the way that these programs are set up. But even though during COVID, they said that it was a state's responsibility to determine the eligibility of medicines in the states, the federal government at the VA level will refer back to the Schedule 1 of marijuana at the federal level without recognizing the state's autonomy for medicine. So it's a big kind of conjunction of a lot of these people who are claiming to be medical here in Ohio are really just profit seekers. And one of the ones that I will name drop is Riviera Creek. They just dropped a 10th, because we don't do weights here in Ohio. We had a scientific community come in and determine that a 10th is a daily dose. They dropped a 10th for $45. That is nowhere near affordable. That's 2.83 grams. Nowhere near affordable for any veteran on disability, but yet they're the ones with some of the highest terpene levels. So it's one of the things where we're starting to see, while yes, there is sometimes labeled as medical markets, sometimes those medical markets are actually profit markets, then that also will go and lobby against patients who are advocating for more variety and choices. And it wasn't until recently that we started to get some cultivars who were patient-focused and patient-centric and owned by patients. We started to see dispensaries that just got licensed that are owned by patients, that understand the struggles that we have gone through, that aren't charging extortionist prices.
That's amazing that you have that. You know, Samuel, I want to say that those are what I would call some data bombs. Like, those are things that you go stand in your Senate office and have a huge group of vets stating those numbers. I mean, that is like, that's not going, woe is me. That is going, here's the reality of this situation, and you are using us. I mean, there's more articulate ways to say that, but that is stuff. One of the reasons that I got pulled into the policy conversation is because when I stand up to my board of supervisors, they listen to me. They listen to me because they know I really am a patient, that I really am a community member. And when I come up there, I don't tell them what to do. I give them information like that, so they have what they need to go do what I want them to do. They don't have the time to go figure that stuff out. But that is arsenal for lobbyists, for senators that support this conversation. Those numbers are amazing. I would like those numbers for my own arsenal, please. It's horrific, yet those really are lobby bombs.
I will absolutely agree with Lelehnia 110%. Those are, that's a lot of great information. You should put it into a press release, send it to your state senators, state legislators, whoever they are. They deserve to swallow that, and then get others and go down there and lobby them. Why? Let us know how we can help. But Lelehnia, thank you so much for joining us for an absolutely amazing conversation. It has been lots to absorb, needless to say, and please come back in the future, check in with us and update us about how it's going. If I hear of any germplasms who's starting or wanting, trust me, I want to put them in touch with you, but I'd also love to join your conversation because I'm very impassioned, you know, as I said, about genetics a bit. And my business partner, Rob Connell Clark, would agree with me.
Well, you guys send me your emails and I'll add you to the calendar, and you don't have to show up to every meeting, but you get the agenda each time so you can kind of stay in the loop and choose to show up when you want to. It would also be amazing. I mean, we have Michael there all the time, but we're always looking for folks to come in and educate us. So if any of you would like to come in and educate us, we would greatly, greatly appreciate that as well.
I'm just a cannabis nerd, so you know, I'm just helpful to have around. Plus, I've been doing this 30 years as a patient, so my curiosity, like I said, it brought me to Rob and the others, and being on Hash Church and speaking with other experts has helped quell some of my curiosity. But there's still so much to learn through the gene mapping and all that. But I would like to thank our members tonight, Mary Lynn Mathry, Michael Krawitz, Alex Popoff, Wade Laughter, Sam Sussman, Peggy Jones. I am Etienne Fontan. I cannot thank you enough for joining us for a fascinating conversation with Lelehnia DuBois. And I look forward to meeting you in person and sharing a fatty with you.
Thank you, all of you, for your amazing work. And then you're a rock star. I've known about you for a long time, and I'm so grateful to be connected. You've done amazing things for us in this industry. And just thank you, all of you, for what you've not only done for this industry, but our country. And however I can support, and I think I can speak for the rest of us at Humboldt Grace, we would really like to help support you guys in your voices as well. So,
well, we'll need
collaborators.
We'll need you next year. We're going to be probably fighting in California for SB 34 since it's sunset. So, you know, we'll call in all the wave the flags high for that one. But keep us posted, and of course, much respect to you for what you're doing for us and the cannabis community. We cannot thank you enough for the legacy project that you're doing, because it affects all of us, and I hope that others will see this and also see what you're doing and add their torches to your light so you can get brighter and wider and achieve your goals. So thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. This is V.A.C. Roundtable number 59, Lelehnia DuBois. Thank you very much, everybody. See you in 2 weeks.
The Veterans Action Council is a Pace Radio Network content provider. You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at Pace Radio.